Galatians 4:22 through 26. This is a very popular foundational core scripture that the WMSCOG will use. One of the few that they will use to try to prove the doctrine of Mother God. So let's read it. For it is written, Abraham had 2 sons, one by the slave woman and the other by the free woman. His son by the slave woman was born in the ordinary way, but his son by the free woman was born as a result of a promise. Now, remember, this is directly from Ahnsahnghong's book. This is chapter 7 of his book. It's the chapter 7 titled, The Jerusalem in Heaven is Our Mother. Okay, so continuing in Galatians 4, he says, these things may be taken figuratively, for the women represent 2 covenants. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. Now, Hagar stands for Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present city of Jerusalem because she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above, here it is. Here's the thing that they focus on. But the Jerusalem above, that is above, is free, and she is our mother. So here's Ahnsahnghong's words in response to that scripture. So Soen was using that scripture to say this shows that there's a mother God, and then she applied that to herself and said, and it's me. I'm the mother God, basically is what she's saying. I'm the heavenly, the Jerusalem above. So here's Ahnsahnghong's interpretation of Galatians 4. Let's see, members, please pay attention to this. Let's see if Ahnsahnghong's thoughts about Galatians 4 are in line with the WMSCOG's thoughts and interpretations. So he says, they use this passage to assert that Soen is our mother who has come down from heaven. Soen truly believes that Hagar is the earthly Jerusalem, while Sarah is the heavenly Jerusalem. The only reason, you hear that? The only reason that Apostle Paul wrote Galatians 4:22 through 26 is to clarify that the history of the family of Abraham is a prophecy. So what's that prophecy? So here he points to 4:24 again. He says, these things may be taken figuratively, for the women represent 2 covenants. One covenant is from Mount Sinai and bears children who are to be slaves. This is Hagar. So here's Ahnsahnghong's response to that verse. This is a prophecy, he says, of the old covenant and the new covenant. Okay, so what does Hagar and Sarah represent? What are they to be taken figuratively as? And again, according to his words, what's the only reason the Apostle Paul wrote this? Well, if it's the only reason, he goes on to say that the Apostle Paul wrote this passage is to show that Sarah and Hagar represent 2 covenants. Okay, so this is a prophecy, he says, of the old and the new covenant. Hagar refers to the law of Moses received on Mount Sinai and the Israelites of the flesh of the earthly Jerusalem, while Sarah refers to the new covenant that Jesus Christ established in the Mark's attic and the spiritual Israelites. The Apostle Paul is speaking of the heavenly Jerusalem. So here's the interesting thing. When I've talked to WMSCOG members specifically about this passage, and they've said this passage is meant to teach us that there's a mother God, that there's a female deity who is our mother, they're taking it to literally mean we have a literal mother. My response has been, no, guys, you're missing the point. Look at verse 4:24 where Paul says these things are to be taken figuratively, and he specifies what he means by saying, these are 2 covenants. They represent the old covenant and the new covenant. And so that's exactly what Ahnsahnghong says. And that's the significant thing, is that when I respond to the WMSCOG's interpretation of the scriptures, I use the same response, somewhat almost verbatim, that Ahnsahnghong uses. So does Ahnsahnghong, here's the question. Does Ahnsahnghong, did he look at Galatians 4, this passage, and see it and interpret it in such a way that results in a doctrine of Mother God? Did he see this as a teaching that Paul was trying to convey the concept, the idea of Mother God? Well, the answer is no. Obviously, he didn't. Okay, so if you go back and think about the WMSCOG's response and their defense of this book, they'll say, well, this was only written for a specific time, special measures law, and it was only temporary. Well, first off, we've already shown that that disagrees with Ahnsahnghong. He says it's unchanging. But here's the thing: another argument they'll use is they'll say, well, he's only focused on refuting Soen, like he was focused on this specific person and refuting this false prophet. Well, even so, he still gives us his interpretation of Galatians 4, even with his focus being to refute umso in, which obviously there's truth in that. That's his major purpose in writing this. But within doing that, his way of refuting umsu in, how does he do that? How does he refute her? He does it by giving us his interpretation of Galatians 4. And also, we'll see in a minute, Revelation. And in doing so, he displays that he disagrees with WMSCOG doctrine. So regardless of what his purpose was, it doesn't matter that his purpose was to only refute umso in, because in doing that, he does it with a method which ultimately disproves the WMSCOG doctrine or contradicts the WMSCOG doctrine. Do you see what I'm saying here? Basically what I'm saying is that he disagrees with the WMSCOG interpretation of Galatians 4. Okay, so irregardless of what the purpose of the book was, we see his interpretation of passages like Galatians 4. The significant thing is that they stand in line with views like mine. They actually agree with my views of these passages. And nowhere in his interpretation of Galatians 4 does he leave room for the concept of Mother God. And so he doesn't have to say the exact phrase, there is no Mother God, in order for us to know that he did not believe there's a Mother God. In the same way, there's other doctrines that Jesus never specifically said, I am the Messiah, I am the Christ, I am God. He never directly said those exact phrases, but we can look at his words and take out of them and understand his meaning to know that he believed he was the Christ, he was the Messiah, and he was God. So that's been a challenge. Again, Seek First in the comments has made. He said, show me exactly where Ahnsahnghong says the words, there is no Mother God, or something to that extent. Well, that's a straw man. That's a false claim. There's no substance to that, because there's other, we don't form doctrines based on that criteria of it having to say the exact doctrine. And outline it in a statement like that. So Galatians 4, we see Ahnsahnghong actually agrees with my interpretation. He leaves no room for Mother God, and he specifies that the only reason the Apostle Paul wrote this, the only reason, was to show the distinction, the prophecy of two covenants, the law of Moses, the Old Covenant, and Mount Sinai, the New Covenant. If that's the only reason, he has then effectively left no room for us to insert or take out of that the doctrine of Mother God.